It's been a good morning so far. We're glad you're here. I want to start off by thanking everybody who helped out with Family Promise again. Another great week. On Friday, for example, the youth group opened up their new room, the refinery, what was formerly the East Hall, is now like this whole new youth area, and there were kids playing in there, playing music, just playing games. It was a blast. And so it's not just about having a place for people to be, to stay, a roof over their head, but just to be loved on, cared about, just to have a good time. So we're glad that all of you who helped out with Family Promise were able to do that, so thanks. We've been spending the last few weeks building our way through the Old Testament, looking at some of the builders and the buildings that they did, but really the focus has been on relationships, building community, building families, building friendships. And this week we're turning to the New Testament. And as you can tell, you go from the old to the new, something big is going to change. And whenever you are building something, you can almost always anticipate changes are going to happen. I don't care what you're building. If you're building something from a car to a spaceship to a home, things are going to change along the way. Now, to be honest, if we're building along, some of us don't like change, and we'll just kind of push on through. We'll just keep on building, and it gets kind of worse and worse and worse. We're not going to change. We're going to keep on doing what the plans we have. When I was a lifeguard back in Indiana, so this is actually Indiana Dunes State Park. Those are actually our lifeguard stands from back in the 90s, way back when. But I was a lifeguard here, and we'd have thousands and thousands of people on Lake Michigan on a good summer day. I'm talking thousands. And so every day we would lose between, not us, but the parents would lose 10 to 20 kids a day on a weekend. Now, we never lost one permanently, but we'd find them. But almost what always would happen was a kid would be on the beach, mom's laying out, dad's not paying attention, the kid's there, and the kid sees something shiny, walks over to it, and is walking along, and they see this thing, like, oh, okay, well, no big deal. And they're like, oh, where's mom and dad? They look around, like, okay, I'll keep on walking. And what they do is they don't look behind them. They keep going forward in one direction. Almost always that happens. And eventually, we would find where they went, but the kid never thought to turn around and go back. They just kept on going forward. And sometimes we do the same thing with our lives. We get going in one direction, and we're kind of stubborn, and we just keep on going. And we know we should turn around. We know we should go back the way we came, but we just kind of want to push ahead. We don't want to retreat. And that same philosophy, that same stubbornness is sometimes true when we build. And we don't change. We don't decide to change, and the things just get worse and worse and worse. I've got some examples for you when it comes to building. You know I probably would. And I really hope these are internet fails. I hope these are not real pictures, but here they are. Here's the first one. There's a better way to do this. It wouldn't be a trip hazard, right? Someone should have said, you know what? This is not a good idea. Let's do something different. But they didn't. They just put it in and then put a sign. Don't trip, right? How about this one here? Someone should have said something, right? The guy who installed that or installed that should have told somebody this ain't going to work. But they didn't. They didn't change. You ever heard of a bridge to nowhere? How about a bridge over nowhere? Like why would you spend money when, anyway, but you get it, right? Last one, I pray this isn't real. Like seriously, like someone should say something. Like the parent on the playground, like don't play on that thing, right? This is like a disaster, but someone did this. So here's the thing. We have to sometimes admit that we need a change. And that requires a conscious decision. You can build anything, right? You can literally build, design anything you want. You can. It can be beautiful and creative and bold, but at some point, you have to call an engineer and say, can I build this thing? And the engineer may say, no, right? You have to obey the laws of physics. You can't do that. It won't stand. It won't support itself. And that might seem kind of restrictive to you. Like, well, I don't like those rules. Well, the engineer is actually not looking out for you. They want what's best for you, so they're telling you what the rules are. You can't build like that. Let me give you a better example that may be more close to home. Let's say you own a car, which I'm sure most of you own a car, and there's usually two things in your car you need. A road map to where you're going, Now, you're like, what's a road map? I've never seen a road map before. Okay, a GPS system, right? A Google Maps, a Siri, or in my case, a Stacy. With a Stacy in my car, I ain't got to turn it on. It tells me where to go, just like that. Go here, do this, boom. I can't turn it off. I've tried. Hi, Stacy. But okay, that's so you've got something like that, right? A GPS, whatever. You want to go get donuts, so you program in donut shop, boom, you know how to get there. There's another thing in your car you need, and it's this right here. Now, this one says Acura on it. Stacy, have you seen this before? No, you haven't, right? This is an owner's manual to your car. How many of you have seen your owner's manual before? Anybody seen this in your car? A few of you have seen it. Who's opened it? Really? Yeah. Sure you have. This one, hold on a second. There you go, is brand new. Never been opened, never been looked at, right? Because a lot of the times we don't look at this unless we need to know, like, where the windshield wipers are. How does the radio turn on? How do I program Siri into my car, right? We have this whole idea that we don't really use this unless it's really necessary. Like, where are the lights? What do I do when it rains? You look up in here. When it snows, it says, you're in Phoenix, it doesn't snow. But this is designed to tell you how the car is to run. But most people, except for, the faithful ones in here, don't look at this thing. We don't look at this or read it until it's necessary. Because what's our goal with the car? To go get donuts, to drive someplace. And so until something breaks, this is relatively useless. It just kind of sits in the glove box. Now, over the last several weeks, we explored how God gives us a lot of freedom to build. We can build a lot of different things with our lives. We can build in a lot of different ways with our lives. But at the same time, there are some things that God gives us that isn't meant to limit our flexibility, isn't meant to restrict us, but to help us. It's like our owner's manual. And sometimes when we get in trouble, we need to go back to our owner's manual. Last week, we asked the question, what is your why? Like, what is it you're trying to build with your life? Where are you trying to go? What is your why? What stirs your heart and moves you? But does that why align with God's why? And that's why he gives us an owner's manual, to make sure that those two things go together, that God's owner's manual isn't meant to be restrictive or limit our freedom, but help us to get there, to help us accomplish our why, our what of our lives. Help us get back on track when things change around us, or our situation changes, our health changes, our life changes. But it's only useful, like this owner's manual, it's only useful when we decide to use it. And that's a choice we have to make. We have to decide to go to the glove box, open it up, and actually open the thing up and take a look at it. See, life is full of choices, a ton of choices, everyday choices. And we have to learn how to decide well. How do I make good decisions that keep my why on track, that keep me building in the right ways to accomplish my why? And that means spending some time in God's owner's manual. Now, we're going to take a look at today in the New Testament kind of the most basic plans that God gives for decision-making, how we make good decisions with our lives. And we're going to open right now to Matthew chapter 8 and start right here, where we get kind of the first basic plan. Starts here in verse 18. Now, when Jesus saw great crowds around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. Okay, that's not the command, but it gets us there. What's happening in this story is Jesus has been teaching, right? He's been taking care of his why. His why was to say to people, God's back. God's with you. God is calling you home. I'm here to teach and to heal and to be with you, and more importantly, to call you back to God and to give you a way back home. That's what his why was, and he was doing that. But he decides at some point, I'm going to go over there, across the Sea of Galilee to another place. And that means the people who are with him have to make a choice. Are they going to stay there, or are they going to follow him over there? So there's our choice that we have before us today. Verse 19. A scribe, now a scribe was like a religious leader, knew the law very well, community leader, that kind of guy, approached and said, "Teacher or rabbi, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." So he says to this guy, all right, I'll give you a little parable. You want to follow me? Are you prepared for that why? Are you prepared for that road trip? Are you prepared for that building? Have you thought about it? Because if you do, it's going to change some things. This isn't a philosophical question, right? This is not about a life about God. This is a life with God. Are you building a life about God on the periphery, or are you building a life with God? That's what he's asking him here, because that might mean you have some changes. This isn't like a knee-jerk reaction. You know, like, I think sometimes we get this idea that we'll see something, and we're like, oh, I agree with that. So we click the like button. Right? If you're on Twitter, you hit the little heart button. Like, oh, I agree with that. Boop. Oh, I'll give that a thumbs up on Facebook. Following Jesus? Sure. Thumbs up. Boop. We hit that little button. That's it. Jesus is saying that's not it. See, notice he doesn't say no to this guy. He's not telling him to get lost. What he's saying is, you got to think about it. Have you really thought about what this means? Are you prepared to be homeless? Are you prepared to give up your house and your nice refrigerator full of food? Are you going to give those things up if you want to follow me? Because that's what's going to count. Are you going to count the costs before you start building? Jesus says it like this later in Luke's gospel, Luke 14. "For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost, to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.'" So you're going to sit down and figure out, can you finish the race? Can you finish the building project? Do you have enough to finish your why? All right, so what does the scribe do? Does he get in the boat? Or does he go back home to his nice house and his fridge full of food? Let's take a look. Next verse. Another disciple said to him, "Oh, wait a minute. Did I miss something? Because this is like the next verse." Guess what? It doesn't say. It leaves it kind of out there. We have no idea what this guy does. We don't. It just stops. And instead we get another story. Another guy walks up to Jesus and says, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." But Jesus said to him, "Follow me. Let the dead bury their dead." Now, I don't know about you, but this one's hard. I get the first one, right? I mean, I get Jesus saying to him, you got to count the costs, man. You got to make sure you know what you're doing. But this one, it just seems a little bit cruel. Because after all, the Torah, the Old Testament, God's instruction, tells people to take care of their parents. Kids, take care of your father and mother. By the way, next weekend is Mother's Day. You got a reminder, okay? So you got to take care of your parents. So what's going on in this story? Why would Jesus say something like this? Because this guy is saying to Jesus, I want to follow you, but I need to take care of my religious responsibilities to my parents. But the key to this part is, he's asking Jesus. He's not telling Jesus, hey, I'm going to follow you, but first I'm going to go take care of my dad and his burial, and then I'll be back to help you. Instead, he's actually asking, can I go back and take care of this? Now, why would he ask that question? Because he knows something has changed. Something big has changed. This isn't just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go follow Jesus. This is once-in-a-history opportunity to go and follow Jesus. He's changing everything. Religious tradition, religious practices, what community means, what family means. He's changing all of that, Jesus is, in this story. So this guy's asking, I see you're changing stuff. And this is a big deal. So I'm asking you, Jesus, because you're the guy who's changing it, you're the guy who has authority to do this, what do I do? And so it's a great question he asks. And Jesus is saying this, look, focus forward. things are changing. Focus on life. Because no longer does death have the last word. I want you to come with me. We're going to talk about life, eternal life, a life for you today, a life for you in the future, a life for your family. Look, Jesus is not at all against families in this. Not at all. He is not talking down about families at all. In fact, when Jesus is on the cross, he is dying on the cross for humanity. Like a history-changing, world-shaking moment. What's one thing he does from the cross? He takes care of his mom. He looks down from the cross and he says to John, hey, take care of my mom. Make sure she's taken care of. But he gives responsibility for her to one of his disciples. Not one of his brothers, one of his disciples. And why does he do that? Because for that disciple, John, God's kingdom came first. John's why was tied to Jesus. And Jesus knew that John would take care of her because John loved Jesus and his kingdom. Here's the deal. If we put God's kingdom first, everything else falls in place. You want a good family? Solid friends? Put Jesus first. Everything else will be added to you as well. That's what's going on here. Jesus is saying, look, follow me. That's the first thing. You get that in order, you'll build well. You'll travel well. You'll have the strength to finish the race because I'm going to be with you. In fact, that's one thing he says here. This big question of this is, what would you do? Right? Because again, the same thing, this guy, we don't know what he does. We don't know if he stays, leaves, but it's open-ended so that we can put ourselves in there and ask the question, what would you do? Would you follow Jesus or would you not? It's a question for us. Because one of the things about this story is Jesus goes with him. See, when Jesus says, follow me, there's still a lot of freedom to do that. It's a simple two-word statement, but there's a lot of freedom in how we follow him. Follow me means changing the world, to see beyond ourselves. Jesus did that again and again and again with people. One day he goes to Peter and his brother Andrew out fishing. They're just doing fishing stuff, right? They're fishing. And Jesus walks up and says, hey, come follow me. Like, okay. They put their nets down, they go and follow him. Kind of a earth-shaping moment for Peter. But he had to give something up to do that. He had to change his priorities. He had to decide to change his priorities to follow Jesus. And a lot of times in our lives, there are things that are in our hands. Like he had nets, right? Fishing nets. What is in our hands that we're holding on to? When Jesus says, follow me, we're like, I'm fishing. I've got stuff. Is it a hobby or a habit? Is it a career or maybe comfort, being comfortable? Is it a passion you have? Or maybe a possession you're holding on to? What is you holding on to? What nets are you holding on to you can't let go of? To answer this question, will you follow me? Again, and please understand, the biggest part of this, when Jesus says, follow me, he's not asking us to do something that he didn't do himself. He's not giving you a roadmap and saying, here, follow this. Here's a GPS waypoint. Go there. He's saying, follow me. I'm going with you. I'll be alongside you along the way. You can go with me because I did it. I did this, and you can come with me. It's something we call ignition. There's a book I read several years ago. I picked it up last week because I was interested again, called The Talent Code. The Talent Code. Great book. It's about talent. And the author says that talent isn't born, it's bred. It's made. And this author went around and looked at places where there's a lot of talent. Soccer fields, musicians, tennis. And he went through the elements that were common to all these places where there was these hotbed of talents. And one of the things that he found, of several things, but one that struck me was something called ignition. There's something that happens in a community that kind of sets it free to do things it didn't think it could do otherwise. For example, this is one he gave. In 1954, Oxford medical student Roger Bannister did something big. Something that the Sports Illustrated called the greatest sporting achievement in the 20th century. You know what he did? Ran the mile in 4 minutes. It was thought in the 50s that was physiologically impossible. It could not be done. It just, your body couldn't go that fast. Guess what? He broke it. Weeks later, John Landy did the same thing. Within 3 years, 17 other athletes had less than 4-minute miles. 17. How'd that happen? Same track, same tennis shoes, everything's the same? How'd that happen? Ignition. One person, Bannister, showed that it could be done. And so the people started doing it. Jesus says, follow me. I'm going to show you the way. Ignition. And now we decide, do we follow him or do we not? In the Talent Code, he says this, ignition is about the set of signals and subconscious forces that create our identity, the moments that lead us to say, this is who I want to be. Who I want to be, sorry. That's what it says. Jesus says, okay, great, follow me. That's ignition. Jesus says it in 2 words. So that's kind of our question when we come down to change and choices we need to make. This is where we start. This is the owner's manual. Now, like I said, that may look different for us 2,000 years later. In these stories we just read, Jesus is right there. So they can literally follow him. He's standing there. What about us? Especially in a world that's changing like crazy. I mean, all of us know how fast the world's changing around us. How do we make good decisions? Not just about what we build with our lives or where we're headed, but decisions about how we build, how we get there. Because the how we do these things is just as important as the what we do, just as important. Years ago, I was teaching at a college, Atlanta Christian College in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. And one of the things I always did with my students early on was I gave them a paper to write, and the topic was decisions, because I was curious. I said, pick a moral decision. Even in your mind, like right now, think of something that you struggle with, like some moral decision, but not just a theoretical one that's practical and personal. Like you've got to do something, make a decision, make an action. You got to do something. How do you decide? What's the process? That was the paper. So pick something in your head you got to decide about. It's a struggle that you've got to do, and then just write down like how you decide. Do you go ask your grandparents, your parents, your friends? Do you write a pros and cons list? Rock, paper, scissors? Like what do you do to make a decision? Because that how is super important. What was interesting when I read these papers, I read probably hundreds of these papers over the years I was there. Do you know that not one single student, not one, in Bible college said the Bible? Not one. Isn't that strange? Not really. Because the Bible's not set up like that. There's no like index in the back where you look up, should I go see Avengers this weekend? I don't know. And we don't have that kind of thing in there. Instead, what we have is a collection of stories about God with his people. We get about how they made decisions than what they decided. And that's super important because, let's be honest, we can make the right decision for the wrong reasons. Ever seen that happen? Someone does the right thing for all the wrong reasons. We see a lot like a photo op. You go and you help some people, like, oh, here's me helping people. But you're doing it to look good for somebody else. Or you go to God and say, God, I'll do all these great things for you, but I really want this. Right? We can do the right things for the wrong reasons. That's even worse in many cases. So we want to get down to this idea of how we decide. And I want to finish our time today by looking at one of my favorite stories in the Bible that kind of gets to this. It's a fun story. That's why it's my favorite. It's in the book of Acts. In this story, you got 2 guys, and they're just doing their thing, minding their own business. One guy is named Peter. We talked about Peter a minute ago. Chief disciple, head disciple of Jesus, right? One of the 12, a fisherman. He's this great, super guy. On the other hand, we got a guy named Cornelius, and Cornelius is a centurion. So he's in charge of 100 Roman soldiers. He's Gentile, which means he's an outsider. So you got the insider, the outsider. the fisherman, the soldier, the disciple of Jesus, and this guy, who, by the way, it says in the Bible, is a God-fearer. Right? He loves God, he prays, he gives, he helps people, he's righteous. That's where he's at. He's not Jewish. So you get these two different guys. And God shows up to them separately. Okay? The first one, let's over here, Cornelius, start with him. He gets a vision. And in this vision, God says, hey, Cornelius, I'm paraphrasing, by the way, you're a super good guy. Right? You pray, you're righteous, you're doing great. I've heard your prayers, so I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to go send some guys to go to this man named Peter. Now, Peter lives on the Mediterranean in a place called Joppa. Go get him. It's like, okay. Sends his men, they leave. They go hiking out to Joppa, from Caesarea down to Joppa. Meanwhile, in Joppa, Peter is on the roof of his house. I've been to Joppa, by the way, really pretty. Mediterranean's out there in front of you. It's real nice climate. And he's hungry. Right? He's hungry. He's on the roof. He's like, smell food being made. He's hungry. He's like, I'm going to take a break here, rest a little bit. And he lays down. He falls asleep. And he has a vision. Okay? This vision. In this vision, he sees a sheet coming down with unclean animals. Now, men don't know what unclean animals are. They're not dirty animals. They're animals that were not supposed to be eaten. So let's put it in context. So the sheet comes down, and on the sheet are bacon-wrapped dates, buttered lobster, fried chicken and waffles, some crab cakes with light lemon sauce, and extra bacon, because you got to have more bacon. And this happens 3 times. And God says to Peter, hey, Peter, go for it, man. Eat it up. He's like, no way, man. Bacon-wrapped dates? You kidding me? That's unclean food. I can't have bacon or lobster or chicken. I can't have that stuff. God's like, no, go ahead. It's fine. I can't. This happens 3 times, and then Peter wakes up. Now, if you're Peter, what are you thinking? Bacon must be pretty good, right? I mean, no, but seriously, you're hungry. If you're hungry and have a dream about food, what are you going to think? Oh, I'm just hungry. That's probably no big deal, right? I was just thinking about food because I was hungry. At the same time, it's unclean food. So now are you feeling guilty about it? Or is this God trying to tell you something? And it says in the Bible that Peter is thinking and meditating and contemplating and struggling with this vision. Just then, while he's struggling with this decision, knock on the door, and guess who it is? Cornelius' guys. They're like, hey, we're sent to get you and all that. And Peter's like, what? And all of a sudden, this is no kidding, God says to Peter, Peter, focus. Just go with them. Don't think about it. Don't meditate on it. Don't get confused. Just go. Okay, and he goes. Which, by the way, is part of decision making. Ever had a decision where you're just stuck? You made the pros and cons list, you've thought through everything, you're just stuck. Sometimes you need a break, a different perspective, way to see things differently. And God gives Peter that. Just go. Just go with them. It'll take you a while to travel there. Clear your head, because you need to think through this. There was a study done where they took a bunch of students and they put them in a room, all right? In the room, they put in the smell of fresh-baked cookies, right? It smells good, right? Imagine fresh-baked chocolate chip cookies. And they put 2 bowls, a bowl of cookies and a bowl of radishes. Half the group could have all the cookies they wanted, but they couldn't have radishes. The other group could have all the radishes they wanted, but no cookies. You with me? All right, so they're sitting there and like, okay. Now, if you're in the radish group, what are you doing? Right? I mean, you're struggling, right? It's like you want the cookies and you don't want who wants radishes? Like, seriously, right? No one wants radishes. Okay, well, what they did after that, after they gave them some time, they gave them a logic puzzle to like draw this thing out with a pencil, and it was an impossible task. The cookie group, who had the cookies, worked for 19 minutes before they gave up on the puzzle. The radish group worked for 8 minutes. Half. Why the difference? Why does the radish group just give up so quickly? Because it's mentally exhausting to fight temptation. It's hard to be thinking about something over and over and over and over, and you get tired and you quit. Peter needed a break, so God gave him a break. So they go to Caesarea, they go to this northern place, and Peter meets Cornelius' household, his family, and guess what they are? They're Gentiles. They're a bunch of bacon-wrapped dates, right? They're unclean people. But Peter goes to them like he's supposed to. And look at what he says to them. This is in Acts 10 now. He says, this is terrible. You yourselves know it is unlawful for a Jew to associate or visit with Gentiles. Welcome. I'm so glad I'm here. I shouldn't be with you bacon-wrapped people, but I showed up anyway. And then he goes on. God has shown me that I should not call anyone profane or unclean. Go back 1 second, Stephen, for a second. Really? If I said that to you, how would you feel? I really shouldn't call you profane or unclean. So you think I'm profane or unclean? Oh, yeah, you are. But I shouldn't call you that. That's not very hospitable, Peter. Mr. Chief Disciple of follower of Jesus kind of guy. In fact, I think Peter's kind of getting it, that the vision he had about the bacon-wrapped dates and lobster is about these people. So I think he's kind of making this connection. But it's one thing to make the connection and do something about it. So he says, I shouldn't call you that. But then he goes on and he says this, so when I was sent for, I came without objection. Okay, so hey, you know what? I'm here. You're welcome. Now, may I ask you why you sent for me? So, why am I here? Peter, he is in no way reaching out to these people, right? It's almost like it's enough that I'm here, as opposed to doing something about them. It's a strange question. You kind of wonder in this story that if Peter isn't really seeing them as people, he's like, okay, I shouldn't be here, but I am. But I'll tell you what, we're not going to be together. This isn't going to change anything. In fact, I kind of wonder if Peter sees two churches. There's going to be a bacon-wrapped date, lobster, chicken fried church over here, and then a radish church over here. Two churches, Gentile, Jewish. Well, God's going to change that. So Peter tells his story. Cornelius tells his story. When the two tell their stories, guess what happens? God shows up. God shows up on the Gentiles in just the same way he showed up with the Jews. And then Peter sees it and goes, wait a minute, I get it. He has this aha moment, this ignition moment. And he says, you know what? Get water. We're going to baptize them. He didn't offer that before. He didn't say, I shouldn't call you unclean, let's baptize you. He didn't say that. But now he sees this moment where God shows up. He's like, you know what? I get it. You're just like us. We're together. We're one. Let's baptize you. We're one people, one church, one table. Chicken fried and radish people, bacon wrapped people, we're together. But it took a process of change. It took Peter's story, Cornelius' story, some time, and a decision to pay attention to what God was doing in their lives, challenging their assumptions, challenging their traditions. Because we're all invited to the table. All of us. For wherever you're from, whatever your background is, we're all invited to this table. That was Jesus' why. Jesus' why was to call us together. So if you're hurting today and you're broken within, if you feel overwhelmed by the weight of your sin, he's calling you here to this table to follow him here, where he gave his life for us, where he broke his body for you and me, where he shed his blood and invites us to this communion table to share together that we're all together. We're all one people called to one mission. That's simply to follow him in the best way that we know how.